Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my blind reaction to Middle Manager Tonegawa, episode 4. So, we're back with another episode of this fun show. Last time we had a bit of a barbecue trying to get all of the Men in Black back on Tonegawa's side, and I assume now they're going to go back to the boardroom and try to figure things out again. I don't know for sure, but I would assume that's where it's going to be heading at this point. Because the barbecue was only to try and get all of the Men in Black back on the side, as I said. So there's no reason to go back into that kind of thing again. At this point, they need to figure out what to do next. Because Hyodo isn't going to be just standing by forever, you know? He wants his death game, so... Now, I'm not like in a super huge crunch for time, but I do want to get through this today because I do have some other stuff I need to do. So we're going to try to keep this as quick as possible. Yeah. Also, you still have 1 day left to vote on the poll for Friday's new anime reaction. The poll will be linked to in the description below. So if you want to vote on that as well, please do. And I will announce the winner sometime tomorrow, probably in the afternoon or evening. In the meantime, thank you all so much for tuning in, and let's get this started. So when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect, and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black and then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the episodes. So that, or just one episode. So that being said, thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will see you at the reaction. Okay, and we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. Okay, so let me discuss this concept with you. It's something I've talked about before, but I really want to discuss it here. So there's a concept, right? And it basically goes that time flies when you're having fun. When you're enjoying yourself, when you are just having a good time, whether it be playing a game, watching a movie or a TV show, hanging out with friends, etc., time tends to go faster, or at least seem like it's going faster, because, I mean, obviously it can't literally speed up. But it seems like it's going faster because you're enjoying yourself so much that you just lose track of time, and before you know it, it's however far into things you've gone. And the opposite also rings true. When you are bored, when you are specifically sitting around waiting for something, if you are upset or sad, or you're not enjoying something you're doing or watching or whatever, time appears to go slower. It seems to be going at more of a snail's pace, and you just keep counting down the seconds and minutes and hours and so on, and it just never seems to be going fast enough. And these concepts are obviously just that. I mean, like I said, obviously time can't go faster or slow down just based on a person's enjoyment of something. It's just a concept based on how it feels when you're enjoying something. Time is going the same amount no matter what. But like, let's say you spend an hour playing games with a friend, or spend an hour sitting there doing literally nothing. Just sitting there, maybe thinking or talking to yourself, but that's about it. When you're playing games with a friend, that hour will pass in no time. Like, before you even know it, it'll be over, because you're having fun. You're spending time with a friend, you're playing games that you like, and everything just seems to be going good. But if you're just sitting there doing nothing, it's going to take forever. You're going to be constantly checking on the clock. You're going to be sighing out of boredom, just wondering when that hour is going to pass. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because at the end of the reaction, I did mention, I asked, are we at the end of this episode already? This episode felt like 5 minutes. Like, I legitimately was surprised when it ended. Because I didn't think it had been that long since I started. I've watched plenty of shows where it's like I've constantly been checking the clock and it just feels like it's dragging on and on. And watching one like 20-minute episode ends up feeling more like an hour. But this episode, watching this, it felt like maybe 5 minutes. I felt like it was too short. I actually had to check the recording timer to make sure I watched an entire episode. I was legitimately that surprised by it. And so the concept of time flies when you're having fun or just being entertained or having enjoyment or whatnot comes into play here. This is the kind of show I want to react to on this channel. A show that I enjoy so much that I feel like I've only been watching for 5 minutes. The kind of show that I have so much fun with that it flies by before I know it, and I have to constantly check the time to make sure I watched an entire episode. That is what I want from these shows. I mean, you compare that to some of the shows I've dropped, and almost all of them, the ones that I've dropped at least in case of not liking, almost all of those shows have one thing in common. The episodes just felt like they dragged on. And of course, that wasn't like the standout or only issue that I had with those shows. I'm just saying. Almost all of those shows felt like they just kept dragging on and on. I checked the time multiple times during the watching. And they were the same time, approximately, as the shows I love. Like Tonegawa here. But it felt longer. It felt a lot harder to sit through them. And I'm going to bring up a recent example. Yona of the Dawn. Yona of the Dawn, I reacted to 2 episodes before dropping it. And again, there were multiple reasons why I dropped it. But one thing to note is that with both episodes, it felt longer than it was. It didn't even feel like it was as long as it was. It didn't feel like I was watching for like 20 minutes or so. It felt like I was watching not quite an hour, but more like 30 to 40 minutes, somewhere in that range. The point is, it felt longer than it was. And there were times where I did look at the recording timer to see how long I had left. But then you have a show like this, and I don't even feel like I have a chance to check the recording timer, because, like I said, before I know it, it's just over. Shows like My Hero Academia do this too. Steins Gate Zero, not quite as to the same level, but it's done that as well. My Little Pony, of course, has done that. Steven Universe, Star vs. the Force of Evil. All of these shows have had that kind of thing in common, and that's why they're some of my favorite shows to react to. Because every episode feels like it goes by too fast, but that's because I love it so much, because I enjoy it so much. And some people could say, oh, that's a little negative, because it's like, I would rather have the show last a little longer. I would rather feel like it's if I love it so much, I'd rather just keep watching it and all, but I disagree strongly with that. It's the same concept as why I disagree with marathoning shows instead of waiting week. I think watching shows in short bursts makes them more valuable to me as a viewer. To watch them in short bursts and have to wait for the next episode, it makes it mean more when I do get to that next episode. And so, the reason I like that it feels like it goes by too fast sometimes, or just goes by fast in general, is because that means, one, it's obviously entertaining me to that degree, and two, that means when I get to that next episode, I'm going to be that much more excited to see more. Because I'm going to have built up that hype for a week or so, approximately. So it's really cool that these kind of shows do this. That they can just make it feel like it goes by so quickly. But let's actually start talking about the episode, because these afterthoughts have been going on for like almost 8.5 minutes now, and we haven't actually discussed the episode itself. There isn't a lot to talk about with a lot of these episodes. They're really straightforward. So in this one, after everything that happened with the little spontaneous vacation that Tonegawa had his subordinates go on and everything to gain back their trust, he's just trying to figure out what to do next, where to take things next. And so he decides to just go out into society instead of going straight home after work one day. Just to go out into society and try to get some inspiration. He goes to the train station, decides to take that home instead of having his driver take him all the way. And he's like looking around, listening to the people, and he starts to get these inklings of an idea, but it's not really concrete yet. So he decides to continue to stay out for a bit and goes to a sushi restaurant. Maybe he'll hear more there. Maybe he'll have some more inspiration there. And so he starts to put things together with what he had heard people talking about at the train station as well as at the sushi place, and it hits him. He comes up with an idea, and the next day during his meeting with his subordinates, the men in black, he tells them about this idea of human mahjong, which in and of itself is not a terrible idea. Like, all of the others were admitting that it's not a bad idea. They were actually really impressed by it. But Simon Saburo brought up that there are some issues. That it would require a lot of debtors, for example. And there's some issues with the rules that not everybody knows mahjong and stuff. And so Tonegawa acknowledged those issues. He even admitted, yeah, those issues are completely valid. But if you are going to point that out, at least have the nerve to give a suggestion in place of it. And this is something that I've heard a lot of people say. I've heard a lot of people, both content creators and reviewers of content, say that instead of just like critiquing something, just give an idea of how it could be fixed. Like, don't just say something's bad. Tell how it could be better. Explain what could make it better. What you would do to improve on it. Because it gives it makes it a little more constructive rather than just complaining or pointing issues out. It allows the creator, if they watch your content, to be able to make things better, to be able to improve upon things going forward. And it's a very valid idea. Instead of just criticizing, instead of just pointing out flaws, give an example of what could be better. Give an example of how to improve. A lot of reviewers stand by this ideal. I myself, when I've done reviews, I have given examples of what could be done better. Not every time, admittedly. There are times where I've forgotten to do that or just didn't think about it. But I have also done that because I do stand by that idea. And I like it when people can also, when other reviewers I watch can also put that forth. And so Tonegawa has a completely valid point here. And Simon Saburo was ready for that. He anticipated that, and he already had an idea in mind, which makes sense. In fact, I'm sure he's not the only one there who did have an idea in mind, because they knew they were going to be going back into that boardroom. They knew that they were going to have to figure something out still, especially after all the previous ideas had been erased. And so Simon Saburo decides to take things further by taking two of the previous ideas that were thrown in and combining them to make what basically comes out as this almost airtight plan that really has no noticeable flaws right off the bat. It works in its goal of entertaining Hyodo. It's definitely diabolical. but it's also very easy to understand. It doesn't require too much in comparison to like other ideas like the human mahjong, and it's really simple, but it also requires a lot of strategy involved from those playing it. It gives a lot of room for people to form alliances, to betray each other, and this is something we see when this game is played in Kaiji Ultimate Survivor, in the original series that this is a spin-off of. When we originally see this game played in Kaiji, we can see how just expertly done it is. Like, let's be honest, it's such a well-crafted idea. And this episode is basically the birth of that concept, the birth of that idea. In universe, of course. Now, I don't know how the creator of Kaiji had come up with the idea, but still. It's just a really cool concept that I love that they included in this and really put a lot of effort and thought into how to make this work. Not only just from a, again, in-universe perspective on how to make it, like, fit in and make sense, but also just from a logical perspective. How to make it work in a way that would actually make it that airtight. How to work it and word it and actually plan out a legitimate game idea, basically, that makes it just really stand out, and to make its concept just so, like, locked in. Like, it feels so... It feels real in a way. And it's a concept that's created for this franchise, but it feels like it's just a real thing, because it's so, like, well written. It's so well thought of, that it feels like it's just something that people do. So it's a fantastic idea, and it's fantastically well handled by the creator of this franchise of Kaiji and Tonegawa, and of course by everyone that came together to make this a thing, especially with the anime adaptation here. So yeah, I'm really impressed by this. This episode kind of showed that this show is not just comedy. I mean, it is definitely comedy, but it showed that it's actually taking the time to really build in on its universe and give a proper focus to story and thought in terms of how everything would work, how it would come to be, and how natural it would feel in its execution. So yeah, this was a very good episode. And that is why it felt like it passed by so quick. That is why it felt like it was 5 minutes instead of like the 20 minutes it actually was. Because it was so well handled in pretty much every way. I'd say this is probably the best episode of the show so far. And all 3 episodes before this have been great, but this one really surpassed all the others. Even without having Hyodo directly in it, outside of like Tonegawa, his thoughts regarding Hyodo, everything just worked. It just fit. And it even kind of hinted at a couple things. Like, one thing specifically that it kind of told us, like earlier than it was revealed, when Tonegawa was imagining Hyodo's response to the human mahjong, did you notice that the way Hyodo was laughing and speaking in that imagined thought was very robotic, very fake? It kind of... I wanted to say something, but I was kind of thinking maybe it was just me, or maybe it was just the way Tonegawa perceived how Hyodo would react to it. But when I think back on it, Hyodo's reaction, the way he was laughing and everything, that does not sound like how Hyodo laughs. That does not sound like how Hyodo reacts to things. So, I thought about it, and it's like, that was purposefully done. It was to basically foreshadow the fact that this idea wasn't really good, or at least wasn't good enough. That it wasn't perfect and wouldn't be what Hyodo truly wanted. Would it have entertained him to a degree? Sure, but only to a very small degree. he probably would have noticed those flaws too, and he would have been less entertained and less impressed than he should have been, which is why his reaction in that ideological or idealized mindset of Tonegawa's was so muted, you could say. It wasn't like that for Tonegawa himself. He probably imagined it to him as being this great reaction. But to us as viewers, it was very much foreshadowing to how that idea was going to get shot down and wouldn't work in the end. And it kind of went along with my theory about whether or not the rock paper scissors was going to be the first game really introduced, the first death game that they think of, and that they actually put into motion. Because I had mentioned in the other episodes, it's like, is that actually going to be the first game, or are they going to come back to that in the future? And it kind of goes along with that by having it like, oh, this other big idea, the only other big idea doesn't really work. It's not going to really work. So we'll probably have to go back to the ones that we know as viewers who have seen the original Kaiji, or even who have just seen the recap of the original Kaiji in the first episode. It's going to go back to something we know will work, something that we already know. It was a thing. So yeah, it goes to that. And it's impressive as hell that this episode could do that. It's just so tightly written. It's so expertly done. And I'm really excited about it. That's why I've been talking for almost 20 minutes now. Almost the length of the episode. And I haven't even noticed that this much time has passed until I just looked down at the timer now. Because I really was excited to talk about this episode. It was that good. It was that well constructed. And I'm so happy that I got to review this series for this episode alone. Or react to this series, really. I guess you could say I kind of do reviews as well, because this could count as a review here, my afterthoughts and all. But either way, tell me in the comments below what you thought of this episode. Did you find it to be as genius as I did? Did you notice a lot of those little foreshadowing things that I did? And what did you think of how they decided to come up with the idea of restricted rock, paper, scissors? And that it was actually Simon Saburo's idea and not initially Tonegawa's. Tell me your thoughts on all of that and more in the comments below, and thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.
And don't just live for tomorrow, or just live for yesterday. Just be glad for all you have that's in today. And though you've come through many obstacles, shed tears along the way.